The archer reached the ranch just before first light, when the desert still held its breath. She came out of the juniper like something already half remembered, barely upright, one hand pressed to her side, the other gripping a bough wrapped in torn cloth. Her footprints were uneven, dragging, smeared with blood that had dried dark against the dust. She did not call out. She did not ask for help. She made it 3 more steps and collapsed. Eli Rourke was fixing a fence when he saw her fall. He stood still for a long moment, listening. No birds. No wind. The kind of silence that follows violence, not peace. When he knelt beside her, he saw the wound, deep, deliberate, meant to slow rather than kill. He had seen that kind of cruelty before. It was how men marked property they expected to reclaim. Tied to her quiver was a strip of rawhide burned with a symbol Eli recognized from rumor alone. A warlord's mark. A man who did not steal for hunger, but for industry. Women sold south. Children traded north. Tribes hollowed out and blamed for their own disappearance. The archer's eyes opened once. Sharp. Unafraid. Far off, somewhere beyond the ridge, riders were already moving. Eli knew then this was not a moment. It was the beginning of a countdown. Eli Rourke carried her inside without ceremony. The cabin was small, built for weather and solitude, not mercy. He laid her on the table, cut away the blood-stiffened cloth, and cleaned the wound with water he had hauled himself from the arroyo. She did not cry out. Her breath tightened once, then steadied, as if pain were something already accepted. The cut was meant to cripple. Whoever struck it had known exactly where to place the blade. Eli worked in silence. Outside, the light rose enough to show the land for what it was, open, exposed, unforgiving. There was nowhere to hide a body out here. There was nowhere to hide a choice, either. By mid-morning, hoofprints appeared at the edge of the wash. Not close. Not yet. Riders testing the ground. Measuring time. The archer woke as Eli tied the last bandage. She studied the room, the rifle on the wall, the single chair, the door with its worn latch. When her eyes met his, she spoke one word in careful English. Go. He shook his head once. If he turned her away, the riders would take her before nightfall. If he sheltered her, he would be marked as something worse than an enemy, an interruption. Eli stepped outside and dragged a cedar branch across the wash, erasing the trail. He led her horse into a narrow cut where shadows held through noon. Then he returned and barred the door. When the archer saw what he had done, she nodded, not in thanks, but in recognition of cost. By choosing to hide her, Eli Rourke had made himself visible to forces that preferred no witnesses. And somewhere beyond the hills, the warlord would soon learn that his property had not been returned. By afternoon, the story had already begun to travel. Eli rode into town for supplies he could no longer afford to lack: salt, flour, lamp oil. He kept his eyes forward and his voice low. In places like this, danger announced itself in whispers long before it arrived with guns. Men stopped talking when he entered the store. Not all at once. Just enough to notice. The proprietor weighed the flour without meeting Eli's gaze. "You see riders this morning?" he asked, as if discussing weather. Eli said nothing. That was answer enough. The warlord's name was never spoken aloud, but it moved between counters and chairs like a draft. A man who owned more than land, he owned crossings, wagons, papers stamped by officials who liked their hands clean. He paid tribes to raid other tribes, then sold protection from the very chaos he caused. Justice, shaped into a business. A woman at the far table leaned close to another and murmured, they say when he wants something back, he sends 3 men first. Then the law. Then himself. Eli paid and left. On the ride home, he saw dust on the horizon, too orderly to be cattle. A signal fire burned low in the south, answering another he could not see. The archer was awake when he returned, sitting upright despite the pain, restringing her bow with careful hands. She looked toward the window, then to him. "They are close," she said. Eli nodded. He had known that before he ever rode to town. What he did not yet know, what no one in town would say plainly, was how wide the Warlord's reach truly was. And how many men would come wearing different faces, all serving the same machine. The first riders came just after sundown. They did not approach the cabin. They circled wide, letting their horses announce them. It was a courtesy of a kind, an offer to surrender without blood. Eli watched from the window, the rifle resting against his shoulder, the archer seated behind him in shadow. A voice carried from the dark. "Calm. Practiced. Man inside," it called. "You've got something that belongs to someone who settles debts properly." Eli stepped onto the porch so they could see him clearly. "Nothing here belongs to anyone but me." There was a pause. Then quiet laughter. They left without pressing. That worried him more than gunfire would have. By morning, a different kind of visitor arrived. 2 men rode in wearing dusters too clean for ranch hands, pistols polished, papers folded neat in their breast pockets. They spoke of law, of treaties, of recovered property. They said the archer was stolen goods, her escape an act of theft itself. Eli read the seal. He recognized the name beneath it. A man who never came west unless paid. He tore the paper in half. That was the moment the conflict stopped pretending to be personal. By noon, wagons moved through the coulee south of the ranch, covered, guarded, efficient. Eli followed at a distance and saw inside what the Warlord sold: frightened faces, bound wrists, lives counted like sacks of grain. At dusk, smoke rose where the wagons had been. When Eli returned, the archer stood outside, bow in hand, her wound reopened but her stance unbroken. "You have crossed many lines," she said. "So have they," Eli answered. And far beyond the ridge, the Warlord turned his horse toward the ranch, not to retrieve property, but to protect an empire. The Warlord did not come with haste. He arrived the way institutions always do, slow, certain, escorted by men who believed the world made sense because someone else decided it for them. His riders fanned out across the plain, not to threaten, but to occupy. To remind the land who claimed authority over movement and breath. Eli watched from the ridge as they took positions along the river crossing. The archer stood beside him, silent, her bow held low. She knew this man. Not his face, but his weight. The way violence bent around him, organized itself. When he finally rode forward, he wore no insignia. He did not need it. "You've caused losses," he said, his voice carrying easily. "Losses create disorder." Eli answered without raising his rifle. "So does stealing people." The Warlord smiled, patient. "People are a resource, same as land. The mistake you made was thinking this was about her." He gestured, and a line of wagons emerged from the cottonwoods, new ones, already moving. The system correcting itself. The archer stepped forward. Her arrow flew before anyone shouted. It struck the Warlord's hand, pinning it to the saddle horn. The sound that followed was not a scream, but surprise. Eli fired. The quiet returned unevenly, as if the land itself were unsure it was allowed. Eli buried the dead where the river bent, stones laid without markers. No names were spoken. Names had been the problem. They gave men permission to believe they were permanent. The archer stayed 3 days. Long enough for the wound to close. Long enough for word to spread that the crossing no longer belonged to anyone who could sell it. Riders passed at a distance and did not stop. Towns learned new routes. The system, wounded, withdrew to find softer ground. On the 4th morning, she saddled her horse. "You made enemies that will remember," she said. "So did you," Eli replied. She considered that, then nodded once. Before she rode, she set the burned rawhide mark into the fire and watched it curl to ash. By winter, the fence was rebuilt. Grass returned where wagons had cut the earth raw. Some said the ranch was protected now. Others said it was cursed. Eli did not correct them. Years later, travelers still spoke of a place where an empire broke on a narrow river and never fully reformed. They spoke of it quietly, as people do when they want a story to remain true. The land remembered. And that was enough.